Are you looking to set up your own limited company? In this short tutorial, we'll show you how to do that screen by screen. This is a tutorial on how to incorporate your company. You may have decided you want to trade as a limited company, and for the moment you don't want to involve the services of an accountant. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend that. I think the earlier you talk to an accountant, the better. But if you want to go ahead and set up your company, this is how you should go about it. So this is the Companies House homepage, and you want to start a company and then set up a private limited company. This will give you a choice and some information about setting it up and what you need. We're going to go straight to register your company. Register now. And then you need to log in. So this is the first screen you will come across at Companies House on your journey through registering your new company. So we're going to use Gardenia Grove Limited, and we're going to use Limited. You can choose your ending, you might go LTD, but we're going to stick with Limited. Registered office, you have to have a registered office. Most people use their own home, or potentially they get a registered office address set up for them. We're going to go England and Wales, and we're going to set it up at Clearways Accountants address. Just to be clear that you need to put in the address you want to use. You can't use Clearways Accountants if you're not one of our clients. So the information is completed. It's still in England, and we're not using a PO box number. And that's it for the first page. So click Next. SIC is just a trade description. And we're going to go for something like head office activities, which covers a whole gamut of consultancy things that you might do, and we're going to go management consultancy. As you can see from the drop-down menu, there's a whole load of different categories you can choose from, and you just want to pick the category that's closest to your planned activity. So we'll move on from that. Next. Officers. The officers are the directors of the company, and the directors are responsible for the management of the company. For a lot of small businesses, the shareholders and the officers or directors will be the same, but they don't have to be. If you think of big companies like BT, they have a board of directors and then they have millions of shareholders. But for our example, and for most small businesses, they will be the same people. So we're going to set up with Mr. John Smith, who has no middle name. He is resident in England and he is British. We're going to give him a date of birth of the 10th of the 10th, 1960, and we're going to make him a consultant. This should all be fairly self-explanatory, because in the main this will be information about you because you're setting up the company. If you've been married or used a different name, pop those in. Service address. Now, as this says, it's be on public record. So you may be happy to have your registered office and your service address at your home address, but just be aware that this will be available to the public. If you've got someone like an accountant looking after your business, you may want both of those things to be at their address. So we're going to say that it is at the company's registered office because we've set it up to be at Clearways Accountants. And then we've got the residential address, which is not on public record. So if you've used an accountant's address, then you need to put in your actual address here. So we're going to make it in England again. Let's make it in Reigate again. And we will pick another house on the road. So we'll call it ABC, Surrey. And you have to tick the box that you've consented to act as a director. So you can't force someone to be a director. So once this is done, we submit. Now you go through the process again if you wanted to have more than one director. Just be aware that when you're a director of a company, you do have to complete a self-assessment tax return for income tax. So if you're wondering whether to put you and your spouse on, you might want to bear that in mind because both of you will have to complete tax returns. Let's go on to the next screen. Capital. Now this is the share capital of the business. All limited companies have share capital. So what I would recommend is that you click on the select and pick. You might want to have just ordinary shares, and you might want to set up different classes of share, so using A shares and B shares. Now why would you choose one over the other? Let's suppose it's just you in the business, you're going to own all the shares, you've got no family, that's it. In that case, you might as well just have ordinary shares and you will own them all, job done. If you are married and your spouse wants to be involved in the business, but not to such a great extent, you might choose to set up different share classes. So she might have A shares and you might have B shares. And this just gives you a bit more flexibility on when you pay dividends and how much dividend you want to pay. So in this example, we're going to assume that John is going to set up his business with him as a director, but with his wife as a fellow shareholder. So we're going to go for A shares and B shares so that Mr. and Mrs. Smith can have different shares each. So we've selected A shares for Mr. Smith, and I would recommend, say, 50 shares for him. And the aggregate nominal value, if you click on these question marks, it says what this is. This should be the number of shares multiplied by the nominal value of each share. I would recommend that you use a nominal value of £1, partly because it makes the maths easy and it's clear and simple. So what we're saying is we've got 50 A ordinary shares of £1 each. So the aggregate nominal value will be 50 times 1 equals 50. Let's close that. The prescribed particulars will come up automatically, and unless you know you need something different, I would recommend you stick with the generic version that Companies House provide. So we'll then submit that. So now we need to add another share class to this currency because we're going to give them 50 shares each for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So we'll go back to select, we'll go for B shares, select, we'll do the same number. They're going to own the company 50-50. You don't have to do that. They could own the company 75-25, 80-20. It's up to you. And that may be where you want to have a conversation with an accountant. But let's assume it's 50-50. So we'll go through the same process again. 50 shares, aggregate nominal value at £1 shares will be 50. We'll leave the particulars the same and submit. And now we can see both share types, A shares and B shares, on the screen. And that's all we want to do. We've only got 2. If you wanted more, you could add more. Then we need to click Amount Unpaid. At this point in time, your company doesn't exist, you haven't got a bank account, you've paid nothing in. So the total amount is unpaid. So that's 100. And then go on to next. Subscribers. Now these are the original shareholders of the company, the first shareholders. So in our example, this is going to be Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So we'll add John Smith as a subscriber. And again, we'll have to put in an address, and it appears on public record. So we're going to use the Clearways Accountants address. Just to be clear that you need to put in the address you want to use. You can't use Clearways Accountants if you're not one of our clients. And Mr. Smith is going to have the A shares. He's going to have all 50 of them. He's paid nothing. And the unpaid amount is £1 on each share. So 1. This last bit is online authentication information. So let's make up the data for this. We need to add a new subscriber because he's setting up the business with his wife as a shareholder as well. And she is Joan. And she holds the B shares. She's got all 50 of them. Again, she's paid nothing up yet because there's no bank account. And so the full amount of £1 per share remains unpaid. And she agrees to be a shareholder. Submit. So there we have the original shareholders of the company. We've got John Smith and Joan Smith. They own 50 shares each, so 50-50 shareholding. So we've finished with that page, on to the next one. This page collects information on persons with significant control. It's people who can influence or control what the company does. And Companies House wants to know about anyone who owns more than 25% of the shares. So in our example, we need to include the information for both John and Joan Smith. So I'll talk you through John Smith and then we'll skip Joan. This is the screen, persons with significant control. We're adding a person. And here we are back, filling in the information for Mr. John Smith. So he does know, because actually he is the one that's going to be completing this form, because that's you. The service address, let's make it the same as the registered office again, because this will show on public record. Then we need to put in the home address. If you've registered the company at your home address, this will be the same information again. If you are using a registered office away from your home address, this is where you add your own private address. It's unlikely you need to tick either of these boxes. So then we have to go through this questionnaire on nature of control. Ownership of shares as a person. The person holds more than 25, but not more than 50. In this case, that's true. He owns exactly 50%. You can ignore section 2 because that's where a firm owns, and this is where a trust owns shares. So we're on to the next question, ownership of voting rights. It's the same thing. John Smith owns more than 25, but not more than 50%. You can ignore the firm and the trust. Does he have the right to appoint or remove the majority of the board of directors? Well, in this case, he does because he is the only director, and that's part and parcel of control. So let's say that's yes. And because he has shareholdings, you can ignore section 8. And we'll submit that one. You would then need to add another person as a PSC, and that will be Mrs. Smith, but we'll jump to the next screen. The company registers. These are formal documents that Companies House want you to keep, and basically they are a list of the shareholders, the directors, and any share resolutions that you've passed. Resolutions, if you like, are instructions for the company, formal documents. Normally, they will be kept at the registered office, so we will leave this. If you wanted them somewhere else, you could change that. But for the main, at the registered office. Statement of compliance. Well, I've completed this, so I would tick an agent. If you were doing it for yourself and your wife, you would tick all the subscribers named in the application. You confirm that you've complied with all the requirements. Tick next. And this is a summary of your information. So you've got the company name, the registered office, what it does, who's going to be director, what shares you're issuing, and who holds the shares. And then you go to next, pay your money, and go. We're not going to pay the money because we don't actually want to set the company up today. But at that point, your company will go through the online system to Companies House. They will authenticate all the information, and within a couple of days, your company should be set up. Good luck with your new business. If you're looking for an accountant, please call Clearways Accountants. I'm Liz. Thank you for watching.